we are talking of that connectivity being applied, say, in country A, country B, country C, and then connecting those networks to actually come with the system for the network. This way you are now applying the ICT and the ITS to make that work. This is the scenario at one of our borders I visited in 2017. You can see our trucks sitting there. That's money. That's where the $75 billion is coming from, where it costs us that much more. This is another border again we visited in 2017, and that's one is supposed to be one of our only one-stop border posts in the region. That's Chirundu border post. You go there, you ask the people in charge, why is this truck here? They have no idea. How long has it been here? They have no idea. Is it a wedding document? Is it broken down? They have no idea. If we continue working like that, that's not a smart corridor. Buy-in into the concept and agreement on standards. And we've got to start off by setting up what you call the real-time monitoring and tracking system, which we'll just quickly look at. The national single windows, connect that and track. Okay, let me go to the actual systems themselves. What I'm saying here, which is a point which has come through several times, to solve the problems we have got in the corridors, we need a more holistic approach. There are so many ministries involved, and we need to have a system where we get everyone involved if we are going to succeed in implementing the smart corridors. Customs connectivity, this is essentially looking at country A, country B, country C, connecting the customs system. You know, people declare one thing on this side of the border, and they declare quite different thing in the other side of the border. You simply need to connect so that what they've declared the other side, they declare the same, and it's part of the ITS, ICT movement. The other one you've got is national single window, which many countries, they can call it different names, which are being established. This is the key one for monitoring the documentation flow, right? Where everyone is connected, you get SMS if your goods are still being held for any reason. Now we move on to the real-time monitoring and tracking system. This is composed of a number of elements. We're talking from the port, if we're talking of a corridor. We need a coordinated port management information system, and then we need to monitor it as it moves from the port to the next border. You need electronic cargo tracking system for all cargo. These systems are in place now, but they are now being used selectively by customs. Now we want to make sure that it covers all cargo. And they need coordinated border management information system. That intelligence transport system we were talking about, that's what we needed at both the port and the border. Quickly, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the code, no time? Okay, let me move on. I mean, these are the systems just being shown to you, you know, so that you can, Now, one component which comes in when you join all those systems, then you actually will be able to monitor on a real-time basis, very close to real-time basis, corridor performance monitoring system. We should pick one from the documentation flow, which is national single windows, and the two from the real-time management and tracking system. You process that information, then you can produce a lot of almost daily report, on how the corridor is performing. Way forward, I think we are really looking at explaining this concept to various stakeholders so that we can start mobilizing all these stakeholders to implement smart corridor in the continent. Well, within 9 minutes, you can't explain much, not this concept. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. You did a very good job with smart corridors. My second speaker will be on enabling 5G in Africa, Mr. Hisham Hendi, who is the Managing Director of Vodacom Tanzania. Mr. Hisham, the floor is yours. Same time, less than 10 minutes.
Sure. Good afternoon, Honorable Minister, Engineer Isaac Morele, Honorable Ministers of the SADC region, ambassadors, senior officials, and delegation from SADC, representatives from the regional, continental, and international organization, distinguished guests, good evening. First of all, I want to thank you all for inviting us today here. It's Vodacom Tanzania and Vodacom Group. And I would like to start my presentation with basically just a quick overview of Vodacom. Vodacom has been around for quite some time, since 1993. We've been a leading African telecommunication company providing services from all over Africa for over than 110 million subscribers. We now operate in the SADC region within Tanzania, Mozambique, DRC, Lesotho, and Kenya, Safaricom, which is outside the SADC region. Now, Vodacom is also majority owned by Vodafone, and also we've been leading a lot of innovations. We've been recently led in the 5G innovation in Africa, and we were the first to launch in Lesotho. And just let me start with this very quick video so that before I can start my presentation on the 5G.
Africa's first 5G ultra-fast, super-speed internet connection.
At the heart of it, although it doesn't often seem like it, we're still a technology company. We were one of the first countries in the world to launch the GSM technology. Let us be among the leading countries in the world when it comes to 5G technology as well.
So a lot of 5G's performance comes from the fact that the bandwidth over which you transmit and receive data is just much wider. If we do not have additional spectrum specifically for 5G, we will not be able to launch 5G.
We know you signed 2 enterprise customers in Lesotho. Talk us through how South African enterprises might benefit from 5G in the future.
We expect that with the proliferation of 5G and the speed and the latency that's going to give, it's going to give us much more use cases where technology in the enterprise is actually going to change how we produce, how we work, and how we connect. Without the 5G's kind of speed and latency, you just can't make the application for augmented reality and virtual reality come to life.
5G technologies really starts to give you the ability to give everybody a very high capacity, very high speeds, but really to take it everywhere.
So if you look inside the cage, you will see in the spotlight Africa's first real 5G connected drone. So this is equipped with a 4K resolution, 360-degree camera, and it's using a 5G CPE to stream the video feed back over the real 5G network in this venue.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. Please go and spread the word. It's been a pleasure to be your host this morning. Enjoy.
All right, thank you. So basically in Lesotho, we've launched the first 5G technology in there. And typically in the 4G technology, you would have a download speed around 80 megabytes per second and an upload speed of 40 megabytes per second with a latency of around 42 milliseconds. Now with this technology, when we did the test with the 5G in Lesotho, we actually managed to achieve an over 500 megabytes of download and 68 megabytes of upload and a latency of 23 milliseconds. Obviously, this is an improvement of close to 80%. Now, I think the interesting part is how that really happened. And I think this is really an important part, because commercially, to make sure that we do that, is that we needed to make sure that we have access to the 5G equipment, which made us also a success. And secondly, a commitment in terms of our investment into 5G. In Lesotho, the 5G case, the real key was the ability for us to acquire a contiguous 1 times 100 megahertz of 3,500 megahertz spectrum, which supported us to attract and promote the investment in a clear and planned bands for 5G quickly. Now, this is very important because we had a very strong collaborative with our regulator there, and obviously the availability of sufficient pioneer spectrum for 5G. Now, just quickly, on terms of the difference between the 5G and 4G, if we look at the there are three main things, really: the enhanced mobile broadband, mission-critical control, and massive IoT. What we basically say here in summary is that it gives a multi-gigabytes speed and obviously an extreme capacity with a very ultra-low latency, close to real-time, and lastly, it enables billions of devices on IoT. Now, if I look at really the journey with Vodacom and 5G, you'll find that we're really getting into smart cities, connected industries, connected vehicles, and let alone the billions of IoT technologies that we could be connecting. It started from the focusing on the enabling our mobile devices to connect via sensor network to our cars, building security solutions, and utilities and healthcare. I was in Germany last year, and they were demonstrating different kind of technologies on 5G. And we were having a discussion around 5G in Europe and how important it is. And there was a lot of discussions around, is Africa ready for it now? And for me, it was actually much more critical than Europe, because if I look at the need of 5G in Africa today, a very important example would be a use case is in terms of education. Virtual reality classroom has failed completely with 4G because of the latency issue. Now with 5G, you can get a virtual reality classroom that will transform the access of education from the cities to the rural areas. And this is something that is a huge need for us here in Africa. A second use case, which is also critical, if I look at healthcare, today we know and we understand that healthcare is a very important priority for most of the governments in Africa. And with 5G, there becomes a remote care that meets the aging population trend. And I think it's really important that we understand that without the technology of 5G, this couldn't be happening. And that's why I think it's really critical that we start adopting the 5G spectrums from now. Now, if I look at really, for me, this is a very important element for the SADC region. Early 5G deployments will be used on 3,500 megahertz and 3,700 megahertz and 700 megahertz spectrum. Now, the 3 gigabytes range, the 3 gigahertz range will provide services in hotspots, urban and suburban areas, while 700 megahertz will be a key to enable the rural 5G. Now, notwithstanding, the 700 megahertz spectrum will also be utilized in urban and suburban areas as well to provide improved quality of service. Furthermore, new bands like 26 gigahertz will play a key role to deliver high-performance 5G typical and hotspot areas. All these bands will collectively provide 5G services addressing varying customer requirements. In most of the markets in SADC, these spectrum bands, they're not been licensed to mobile operators for mobile services. Unlike 4G, there's no opportunity to refarm existing spectrum for 4G. We need new spectrum to roll out the 4G. Tanzania is one exception where 700 megahertz has already been licensed, and us in Vodacom Tanzania has actually been awarded that spectrum. So I think it would be great if we can have the rest of the markets awarded a similar spectrum. Now, the final remarks from me is really to conclude the presentation, since I have only 2 minutes, is basically really the making 5G a reality across Africa. And with that, I mean, we need to ensure that there's a collaborative regulatory regimes around the 4G. And the 5G enabling a lot of opportunities in Africa. There's a lot of smart labs, there's a lot of different startups that really are hungry to develop a lot of applications around 5G, and we need to enable that within Africa. At the same time, we need to ensure that the spectrum is being provided and being enabled across the different countries. 3,300 megahertz to 3,800 megahertz, as I just said, should be harmonized with the 5G bands in Africa. And I think it's really critical that we start the licensing from now across all the countries. And lastly, the rural areas, 5G needs the 700 megahertz. And it's also important that we expedite the DTD migration. With that, I conclude my presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, especially for keeping the time. My third presentation will be for the 5G driving forces and development trends. Dr. Musa from Huawei. Your floor is yours.
Very good afternoon, Honorable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity. I'm Bello Musa, Head of Innovations and Industrial Relations for Huawei Southern Africa. While 5G is the hot topic, it's like the young girl, beautiful girl in town. Everybody's talking about it. So I'll just carry on the presentation of Mr. Hashim from the Vodacom. Well, today we are moving towards what we call the fourth industrial revolutions. It's the revolution which will be empowered by new digital technologies. There will be new connectivities, AI, cloud computing, Internet of Things, and so on and so forth. We call it the intelligent world, the intelligent era, where everything will be connecting, everything will be sensing, and also everything will be intelligent. And 5G is the fundamental, is the foundation of this intelligent world, because of course 5G will bring us that connectivity everywhere, ubiquitous connectivity, fast connectivity. We've been talking since this morning about 5G's application, but believe me, the applications are not only on the high-speed internet connectivity. There are a lot more into the 5G connectivity. Innovation in the business model, in the services will be the key of the benefit of 5G. I have a short video that will quickly summarize what type of services we can really do with 5G. If you can please play that video for me from the studio there.
5G is conceived for a super connected and super intelligent world. 5G will become a powerful technological platform, inspiring many new applications, new business models, and even new industries. The road ahead is becoming clearer, leading us to the 5G world. The driverless car of tomorrow will provide more agile and safer traffic circulation. 5G-enabled driverless cars will enable ultra-low latency communication between car, people, and infrastructure, allowing them to operate smoothly over great distances without limitations. The Mobile Edge Network, based on 5G communication technology, capable of 1 ms latency, could be provided by a roadside unit or base station. Driverless cars will communicate with others using these edge cloud nodes, synchronize their movements automatically. Spacing between cars, traveling speed, and other statuses can be coordinated through efficient communication of vehicular motion and positioning over the ultra-low latency 5G network. 5G communication technology will be one of the key enablers of the future driverless world. Our world is filled with wonder. We are meant to see and experience so much more. With full view image technology and 10 gigabytes per second throughput provided by 5G communication, people can share what they see with family and friends in real time. Evolving communications technology will influence brand new ways for us to work. In the near future, business transactions will fully incorporate the increased convenience of enhanced mobility. 5G-based holographic imaging will be the standard for business communications and information sharing. Family reunions will no longer be limited by distance, appreciating every important moment. The augmented reality technology enabled by 5G will make connecting with loved ones a more vivid experience. The immersive virtual reality enables us to appreciate reunions whenever and wherever possible. Increasing crop cultivation on limited land is a persistent challenge. 5G can support massive connections. People will be able to accurately monitor the topography of the land, crop status and response time, increasing agricultural productivity and quality. In the future smart factory, the portable robot arm will perform flexible product line manufacturing based on a varying process. With requirements for security, precision, and efficiency, future industrialization will require a 10 millisecond detection cycle, 1 millisecond control latency, and massive cooperation, all of which will be enabled with 5G. ongoing globalization stimulates the growing importance of the logistics and storage industries. A large port may handle millions of containers, moving billions of products with vast amounts of information. 5G technologies with the capacity for massive connections will provide E2E tracking, increasing efficiency and reducing costs dramatically. The doors to the future digital world have opened up, and we are only at the beginning of the journey.
Yes, the future of 5G is very exciting. And 5G is real. It's a reality today. We have got a lot of commercial networks. And what you see on the map here is the commercial networks of the world. And we are very proud of Africa. For the first time, Africa is not lagging. We are amongst the first to deploy the 5G commercial network, the one in Lesotho, the one in South Africa, and there are also so many trials, 5G networks. I think we need a big hand for this one. Thank you. 5G is the foundation of the economy to provide a digitalized economy and society, which I believe is at the forefront of all African countries to embrace the digital economy. 5G is the big opportunity. And 5G will influence a lot of sectors. These are some of the sectors that were collected by GSMA. So we can see agriculture, art, entertainment, construction, finance, the retail industry, utility, transport, and storage. All these sectors will be highly influenced by 5G. It's not only a new generation of mobile applications that will give you more access to mobile gaming or online movies. All the services of 5G can be categorized into three different categories: the extended mobile broadband, the ultra-reliable latency communication, and the massive communications, massive type communication. These are the communication that requires a lot of connectivities like IoT. And many of these services will be industrial applications. So you can see here in terms of requirements for the traffic consumption, you have some type of application like your smart metering, asset tracking, public safety, onto the office cloud. All these will be the key application of 5G. And of course, with this application will come a different network structure, network architecture, and the requirement into the spectrums. The video that we have just seen today is a full-fledged of a 5G network, where to have this kind of services, you need at least 100 megahertz of spectrum. The CEO of Vodacom just mentioned it here. We need those spectrum in Africa. Today in Africa, many operators are struggling to get 20 megahertz or 30 megahertz. 5G is good, but do we have the infrastructure? Do we have those spectrums? Do we have the site required to build those 5G? In China, for example, they are accounting for almost 1 billion base stations, literally 1 base station per person in China. How much we have in Africa? We are very, very far from having 1 base station for 1,000 persons. Now the question is, how do we benefit of 5G? How do we deploy 5G even? Well, in Huawei, after many research analysis, the conclusion that we have come with is we should leverage on what we have now, which is 3G and 4G. When you look at this graph here, these are the DOU, the data consumption from different part of the world. Africa is still at its lowest. So we calculated in Africa there is 1.1 gig per user per month in 2018, and by 2024 we'll reach 8.5 gig, which is very, very low. And here is the coverage of 5G or the penetration of 4G. You can see that Africa only, the MBB penetration, mobile penetration is only 42.7%, out of which less than 7% is 4G. Which means less than 7 people out of 100 are using 4G. Why is that? because of the poor network quality. Why the network is poor? Because we don't have, operators do not have enough resources, enough spectrums. Site acquisition is very complicated. This is only for 4G. Now, when 5G comes, we'll never reach anything closer to all these benefits that we have seen if we don't solve those problems of spectrum, site acquisition, and other legal and regulatory policy frameworks. So this is our call here today to the minister to do something, to take action. We can still reap the benefit of 5G even with 4G. Huawei have developed technology, a solution that today we can benefit from the extended mobile broadband even with 4G. We can have a machine-type communication with NB-IoT. We can also have critical services with 5G, with 4G, the actual 4G network, before we leapfrog onto the 5G.
2 minutes to time.
Well, this is the development of different technologies. So as you can see here, we have 3 dividends: the demographic dividend, traffic, and experience dividend. We understand 5G is a very ultra-connected technology. We put it at the experience dividend. Before we reach the experience dividend, we have to benefit from the traffic dividend, which is 4G, 4.5G, and also the demographic dividend. One of the speakers mentioned the rural connectivity. Africa is still lagging, a big digital divide between rural and urban area. We have to do something about that. So our call here is for right policy, necessary legal framework, coordination between different stakeholders, alignment of decision-making, and streamlined approval processes to be put in place to ensure future-oriented planning and rapid development of ICT infrastructure. Huawei has been in Africa for more than 20 years. We have worked together with you. We have achieved a lot of highs. Today, we have served more than 54 African countries. We have built more than 50,000 kilometers of fiber, and we have deployed more than 70,000 base stations. We have put our base station where you will never imagine, on top of mountains, deep within the valleys. We have changed life, and together, we believe that we will continue to do so. As the saying goes, where there is a will, there is Huawei. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the 5G driving forces and development trends. My next presentation number 5, is for infrastructure sharing for rural connectivity. Mr. Simon Karikari, CEO of Tigo Tanzania. The floor is yours.
Good evening, and thank you very much. Honorable Minister, Engineer Isaac Kamwelwe, Honorable Ministers present from SADC region, Permanent Secretaries, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for affording me this opportunity to speak to you about rural connectivity from a telco operator's perspective. Rural connectivity is something that is quite close to one of my passions. So I'll quickly just start, in terms of how a telco operator looks at rural connectivity and what we do to be able to deploy investment. So the key things that we look at is on the size of the area that we want to invest in, the population density, what is the population that is in the rural area, and also one of the key important things that we look at is the electricity penetration in that area, and what already exists, which is already mobile phone or SIM card penetration. This is a map of Tanzania. You'll notice that around the Dar es Salaam area, it's very high dense, but most of the country and most of the areas have got low density. Now, Tanzania is not unique in SADC. If you compare Tanzania to SADC in terms of the key parameters that we look at in deploying rural broadband, Tanzania is very similar to most of the countries that we have in SADC. So in my view, Tanzania is very representative of the region SADC. One of the things that we see, it's a big correlation between where we put investment in terms of rural connectivity. It's really around the density of the population and electricity. And this has been a big challenge for us, a big challenge for operators, because in most places where there's low density, the return on investment has been quite low. In Tanzania, we have a very unique solution that works very well. It's called the Universal Communication Access Fund. This is a fund where operators contribute about 1% of their revenue into a special fund, and through a reverse auction, we bid for sites that are selected specifically by the government to be able to deploy rural connectivity. And this model, in my view, works very well. Maybe the reason why it works very well is because in Tanzania we are in a unique position where the minister is an engineer, the regulator is an engineer, and the head of the UCSAF is also an engineer. So that means that the focus is more on deployment of infrastructure and broadband connectivity. Let's just a brief. So far we've deployed, in terms of rural connectivity across the country, we've deployed over 700 sites. We serve over 750 wards, and it's been distributed quite across all the operators. So all the operators participate in this program. And now we're just about to start the fourth phase of this program, where we're intending to serve another 521 wards in Tanzania. So we're making very good progress in serving the rural community in terms of connectivity and broadband. Yet there's still a lot of challenges, and I'm going to try and keep my time under my time. There's still a lot of challenges. Some of the key challenges that we face is, the return on investment. Most of our businesses are listed on stock market, and we look at return on investment, and that is a big challenge, especially in some of the areas that we have to serve. There's also increased demand for broadband connectivity, so it means that the base stations that we are putting in place now requires 3G, 4G, and very soon 5G, and this requires very heavy use of electricity and energy. There's also restrictive regulatory environment, which means that does not help us share a network that brings the cost of our infrastructure down, which I will elaborate a bit more on that. And then in most of our markets, in most of Africa, the logistics and the infrastructure and getting to rural communities is quite tedious, and it increases our cost to serve the communities in that area in terms of whether it is scratch card distribution or product distribution that we have to do in this market. So in order to solve some of these issues, some of our challenges that we face is that we all have to work together as stakeholders really to try and address some of these issues, and hence why a panel like this and a delegates like this I think is very useful in really looking at really innovative solutions on how we serve the rest of the population going forward. And some of the solutions can be around tax incentives, especially for these very, very rural places. And how do we bring innovative tax incentives, tax holidays to motivate operators to be able to serve this population? The other one as well is on the increased demand for broadband. It's a factor of electrification. If we can synchronize all our efforts around the electrification programs that are going on in this country, we should be able to bring much cheaper access to broadband in some of these communities. The third one is infrastructure sharing, and I will dwell a bit on that a bit of that later. And then most of the things that we are doing now around mobile money and the financial inclusion space is really helping us reduce our cost. I'll spend maybe 2 minutes on infrastructure sharing. So one of the key things, all these things that I've listed here are challenges and require some cost, require some sacrifice from government, require some sacrifice from the operators. But one thing that we can use regulation to do and policy change to do is infrastructure sharing. We can bring in a smarter way of sharing our infrastructure that will bring down the cost of how we deploy rural broadband. We've seen a lot of models all across Africa. Sometimes they are wholesale models. In my view and in my organization's view, we've seen that wholesale models have not worked very well. And the reason why wholesale models have not worked very well is because usually they duplicate the already existing cost of the operator. So they will have to build the same structures, the same base station that the operator has, rather than complementing what the operators have. And also, there's always the debate about who actually owns the customer and who serves the customer and who has the right to serve the customer. And that makes the pricing and the structure models for wholesale models very difficult. What we did in Tanzania in 2016 is a way of infrastructure sharing together with the UCSAF and with GSMA and with 3 of the operators, Airtel, Tigo, and Vodacom, we came together with vendors Ericsson and Huawei and Nokia to build and share a 2G, 3G rural network. And this is something that we can do for 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. And the main thing was that the infrastructure was owned by one single host, so that we have 2 sites that were owned by each of the operators. And we allowed each operator's customers to roam on the infrastructure that is already built. What that means is that reduces significantly the cost of deploying that infrastructure for that operator, and also it improves the access of the network. So it means that if operator A's customers go to that region, they are still able to access the network that the operator B has already put in place. And we build this across 6 regions in Tanzania, as the map shows. Some of the key learnings that we got from there that was very, very useful was that we were able to reach the addressable market very faster. So ordinarily, when we build a network in the rural areas, we get to the addressable market between 12 and 24 months. And in this case, because of the infrastructure sharing, we're able to build to the addressable market much, much faster. Broadband adoption, however, was a bit limited. And the reason why broadband adoption was limited was because of smartphone penetration. Today, in most of our markets, smartphone is still quite expensive. And that is something that we also need to work together as we are bringing in 5G and 4G to be able to bring in the right policies to reduce the smartphone prices, either through taxation or through actually developing the smartphones in our own countries, so that we can bring the prices of smartphone down and get people access to all these broadband technologies that we are building in our markets. But one of the things that was very impressive with this project was we saw a very high demand for financial services. Today, in deploying mobile broadband solutions, we don't just look at data and internet connectivity. What we look at also is financial services, which in most of our markets, because of mobile money, it's becoming very accessible to our markets. And this drives a lot of the economic activity that is done in most of these rural areas. And with this project, we were able to improve mobile money access and financial inclusion. There were some technical challenges, as in trying to make sure that we do localized national roaming, and hence why we need the support of regulators, support of ministers, support of policy to allow better sharing of not just infrastructure but also spectrum, to be able to allow operators to deploy that. Earlier on, my colleagues that presented spoke about the need for spectrum for 5G. There's no abundance of spectrum, but if through smart ways of sharing, we can make sure that these resources are available to all operators in the market.
2 more minutes.
Thank you. The revenues that were made from these sites, this pilot project that we did, was able to cover the cost of the project and the taxes that were required to pay. However, it was not able to cover the initial investment, which in most of our projects, in terms of what we do in the rural coverage, it's still very decent. Because the main thing is that once you put in the sites need to be able to generate enough just to cover at least the running cost of the site, so that you can continue to support that site's operation. And through this infrastructure sharing, we are able to deploy some of these models that makes it more sustainable to deploy in areas where ordinarily it's very expensive and inefficient to deploy. So today, across Tanzania, as at the end of 2018, based on our regulator statistics, we've covered